Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everybody.
It's only you and I so far.
Oh, okay.
I see hurricane is coming. I see that out there is very hot, but I know this is getting like kind of dark. But it's so far away from here. But we have to get prepared.
Oh, wow. I didn't even know hurricane was coming. I noticed the sky, but I wasn't really keeping up to date with the news and stuff.
What is wrong with you?
I don't know. I had no idea. I guess that's why everybody on the road trying to get stuff.
Yes, they just sent out what the people name NEMA?
A NEMA alert is out right
Yes,
now.
NEMA's having a press conference at 4 o'clock today.
Oh, wow. Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Where you been?
Listen to me.
Oh my God.
Stuff. I'm not on the news. Hardly on, not even on social media like Facebook or whatever, where I normally get a news snippet every now and again.
No, from 9 o'clock this morning, they've been tracking the storm.
What category storm is it?
It's about to form into a hurricane.
Oh, okay. So it's like a tropical about to form. Wow.
It's tropical now. Winds are 60 miles an hour.
Wow. I had no idea. And you know what's funny? I was supposed to go on the boat today.
Don't try that one.
Ah, no, I won't.
No. So it's projected. Looking at it, it's coming up over Haiti. And then it's the southern Bahamas. And it'll be like on that side by Eleuthera and those.
Oh.
So we may not get hit, but the point is that any family islands that get hit impacts us.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah, so that doesn't matter whether or not we get hit directly or not in Nassau, because everybody comes to Nassau for help.
That is true. Be the capital. Oh, I would have gone the whole day not knowing what happened.
No, it's projected to be here in the Bahamas by this. Looking at this map by Tuesday.
Wow.
By Tuesday. And you know these things change.
I hope it don't be as bad as the last one.
Oh God, no. I heard the people when they were talking the last one and they were saying it was like a tsunami.
Yeah. Horror stories. Jesus.
Yeah. We don't need that happening to another family island because the cost of these hurricanes is tremendous.
Yeah.
It's a little bit too much. No, you could look it up. Tropical Storm Fiona. Yeah, so they haven't that. It ain't gonna be good.
I pray it don't be.
No, because once it hit our waters, and our waters is warm because you can see how hot it is.
It is hot. It is hot, and the heat is escalate everything.
Yeah, like, so you know what that means. That heat, man, that ain't nothing to be. You think people coming back?
And it's hotter this season than last year. And last season it's hot. This is the hottest I ever experienced this Bahamas.
Yeah. These temperatures be like 106. The heat ain't playing.
What a mercy.
Yeah, it's not playing. It's really hot. That's the only thing we could.
Yeah. I'm reading the Companies Act, right?
Uh-huh.
And oh Lord, I don't know how you could sit and read that in a day, because for me it's like digesting the information. And every time I see a new word that I don't really know much about, I go and look at it, research it or whatever.
Uh-huh.
So I'm reading through the Companies Act, trying to understand the Companies Act. And I didn't even start with the IBC yet, but I figure they're kind of similar, but I don't really know. But anyway, so I was trying to understand the concept of limited by shares, like for company shareholders. And I
Mhm.
know that I saw where it says that the liability of the company is limited by the investment of the shareholders.
Right.
But does that also mean, like, if the company gets into debt, are they responsible for paying the debt, or is the company itself responsible for paying its own debt?
The company itself pays its own debt.
Oh, so the shareholders, the literal only liability is for them to pay the shares. Their only job
Right.
or role
Their
is
in-
to pay the shares.
That's their investment. Let's say the company is bankrupt.
Right.
Then the company will liquidate its assets and then begin to pay its creditors.
Right.
And if there's nothing left.
Oh, okay. So they really only liable to pay whatever share amount they take out, and that's that.
Yes, yeah.
I don't know why that was so hard for me to wrap that around my brains. I read that over and over and over, and I was like, and I Googled it too, because I was trying to figure out if that's it, that's all. But and people aren't like doing the company route, like instead of doing the sole proprietorship, they just go ahead and or instead of incorporating, they would do a sole proprietor, but the liability on that is unlimited.
Yeah. But then but the thing about it is that you do not understand liability and what that means, then you will always go to the route. Because you don't want anybody to want to share a profit. 3, you don't want to have any obligation.
Oh, I guess.
If you right, because if you company, then you need to someone who's going to fund. That's an expense. But if it's sole proprietor, you open your door, you put your money, and if you under the threshold, worry about.
But that's so scary, like when it comes to growth, though, because sometimes as you grow, you open yourself to more like public liability.
Yes.
You could have like professional indemnity and stuff, but
no, sole proprietors don't even have insurance.
sole proprietors, I didn't hear that last part. You broke up.
I said sole proprietors normally don't even have.
Hello?
Yes, proprietorship don't have.
Professional indemnity?
No, they don't.
Yeah.
They don't have that. That's another expense. Why am I going to incur that expense? They're not going to do that.
Wow. That's unless something happened and then they forced to do it. They're forced to learn that hard lesson. They'll be forced to learn that hard lesson.
Right, and then you was in terms of expand. Remember, I was saying very first class. This is why a lot of this close, because they don't come together and form a conglomerate and expand the business. They don't want to share.
And so even with the shares, right? Because for a company that's limited by shares under the Companies Act, right?
Uh-huh.
There has to be 2 shareholders or 2 directors, because I know it's 2 different stuff.
It's direct.
So the beneficial business owner could own all the shares, and they don't have to give away shares.
Yeah, but normally they allow 2 shares they'll have someone who probably hold 1 or 2 shares.
They would normally have someone that has at least 2 shares, you said?
Yeah, 2 shares.
But they don't have to give out shares if they don't want to.
No. The Company Act doesn't have an unlimited shareholders. There's director.
Right. Right. Because that's the thing. Like, you could literally start a company, but if you don't want to give, because I know some people's withdrawal or with starting a company is because they don't want to share in the profits, but you could still incorporate without having another shareholder.
Right. So you can operate in that, but you find a capital of 5. But you could issue 2 as yourself.
Right.
And other 3 issue it if you intend to have other people in your business. But I'm happy to hear the legislation.
Yeah, I have to know it because I'm trying to go through the process with the security commissions to be a registered office. And I really want to know the information, and not just to know it too, but I want to be able to educate people in my age bracket about the importance of getting a company formalized. Because we are so comfortable with just having like a sole ownership type of business. But we don't, and I want to say that we want to build generational wealth, but you really can't pass down a sole owner type business. You can't really pass that down.
No. Just remember, right? Once you form the company has succession. That's the key to forming a company. Then you could have
Right.
But if you're not co-proprietorship, that's always a till company.
Yeah. But how does it work then with a nonprofit? Because I know that nonprofits are limited by guarantee for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking into too the concept of it being both, and my mind ain't wrap around that part just yet. But the nonprofits can be limited by guarantee and don't have any kind of share capital. How would that be structured in their memorandum, or do they even have a memorandum, or is it like a constitution or something? How is it structured?
Yes, it's like a constitution in that there's money up front. But in the event that the company is in problem, then you're gonna have to put forward the guarantee that you had agreed. So
And
let's just say you're an NGO and I pledge 100,000. You may say you pledge 50,000, someone pledged 30,000. When that company is in trouble and the creditors are there paid, you have to come forward with your funds.
Oh, like the persons in the nonprofit have to come forward with funds? What? Out of pocket?
And it says so that's why you have companies that are limited by share and guarantee.
Oh, so that
you don't pay.
So is that like a hybrid nonprofit, or like just a what would that be considered? Just a regular company? It has to have limited at the end?
What, a nonprofit?
Like, no, a company that's limited by shares and guarantee.
No, I mean, you'll know it when you get an arts.
Oh. So with a nonprofit, the process is the same. Like, you reserve a name and you file the not memorandum but constitution then?
Yeah, and it has to go to the attorney general's office because it has to be non-profit. It has to be all
and the Attorney General would have to approve it first
Uh-huh.
before you could file it with the Registrar General.
Yes.
And how long does that normally take, like with the Attorney General? Because I know with like regular companies, that's 48 hours once you put it in.
That's correct. And don't forget now have their
I didn't hear you. Nonprofits have their own. Businesses?
No, I said has their own regulation.
Oh, regulation.
Yes.
Right. Because I did find the Nonprofit Act. I know that wasn't really on our list of stuff, but I was like curious to.
Yeah, we do that in law too.
Oh, okay.
Company law too. We look at the products that we offer. One of them is nonprofit. At private trust, look like executive. We look at all those different products.
Oh, okay.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
How are you?
She ain't unmute yet, I don't think.
No, she isn't. She was looking. When I saw her, it was too late.
Oh.
I said, she most did not look at her skin. Anyhow, let's get started because people have to prepare for the hurricane, and then y'all have to get ready for the funeral on Monday. Please wear all black while you watch television.
Whose funeral?
The Queen.
Oh, right. I
All
thought she was
black.
already.
What's wrong with you?
I was just about to ask who died, but anyway.
What? No, you only. That is a joke, right?
I thought she had already. I'm not gonna lie. I really thought that because I saw a video with the princes and their wives walking down to bow at her coffins. I figured that was her funeral day then.
No, they moved the body from the butler. And they brought it down. What's wrong with y'all?
Oh, okay.
This is a time of mourning for us. You see how long this woman was queen? Over 70 plus years. So we have to show respect. I don't know. What's with you all young people? And there are going to be some changes now that we have a king.
That part I know.
Oh, that part you know.
I don't know if I really like the new king, but hey, it's cool.
Hold on. What do you mean?
Either way, ain't nothing you can really do about it.
That's true.
Well, he is the next in line. He, along with his wife, Queen Consort, so they will be in charge. I'm sure William will still be doing a lot of the work. But we'll see. Because he is not his mother. Okay, so today we're going to talk about risk. What do you think of some of the risk that a board would face in running a company? Think about it. If you're sitting on the board or you're running the company and you're a manager, what risk would you face? And if you go back to our earlier conversation, Christina, this is looking the same thing when you have a sole proprietorship. They're not looking at any risk. They're not looking at, okay, I open my shop on this corner. What if someone open up their shop 2 doors down, selling the same thing? And I see that happen every day. There's a bakery on Dalswood Street that sells pastries. Right next to it, someone take a little cooler, put it outside the door, and they're selling the drinks and some potato chips and some other little pieces of bread right next to it. And so in any business, the board has to consider, how do you manage the risk to your company? And in order to manage risk, you have to know a little bit about risk management. And risk management means that you need to have the tools in place that's going to help you to deal with threats to your company. And in any environment, there are different types of threats to a company. You could have internal threats, which means that you could have people who are in key positions who may decide to leave your organization and then start a competitive business. You could have threats outside of your organization, like the example I just gave you, or you could have threats whereby it is done based on the environment. Sometimes the threats could be changes in law, where the nature of your business changes, or the way in which you do business changes, or new regulations come in place. So whenever you talk about risk management, and you're either management or you're in the board, you have to know a little bit about the area in which you are doing your business and have a little bit of historical information on things that have happened in that industry to know how to approach the threats to your company. So when you talk about risk management, there are 3 levels. One is risk governance. And risk governance speaks about at the board level, how do you make decisions collectively that are strategic in managing those risks. Because don't forget now, you still want that ultimate goal. And that is that the company is there to make money. And that means that you have to minimize the risk. So the board leads that risk governance. So management prepares a report to the board to say, these are the risks that we have identified in our business. This is how we foresee how we're going to mitigate against those risks. These are the policies and procedures we're going to put in place to assist us in reducing that risk. And the board then looks at those risks, looks at those policies, and makes a determination that, yes, we agree with you, or no, this risk needs to be heightened. It's not at a medium risk, it should be at a high risk, which means that more action needs to be taken and that the risk needs to be prioritized to an extent that is monitored more carefully. Now, risk infrastructure is talking about having in place the mechanism to deal with risk. Sometimes when it comes to risk, it could be that you're doing a process manually, and in today's world, it can be done by automation or electronically. And you see that in a lot of industries today. A lot of businesses have now moved to automation. Of course, that means less jobs for humans. But then you have to keep up with the way in which business is being run today. Everything is being done by technology. And the third level of risk is the ownership part of it. which means that each business unit is responsible for identifying its own risk and being responsible for that risk and following the policies and procedures that have been put into place for those risks, making sure that they measure up to and they're able to monitor those risks and the impact on the business. So in any organization, the risk department will always give the board the risk appetite for the company. How much risk is the company willing to take? And that's the decision that the board has to agree with. Yes, this is what we're willing to tolerate. And of course, when you look at the whole risk management and the risk governance, the infrastructure and the ownership, you come with a chart that actually tells you at the very top, you have the board. The board is responsible for the risk appetite. Below the board, there is an audit committee. And below the audit committee, there's a risk management committee. And information flows top down and bottom up. From the board, once they approve the risk appetite in the framework, and they approve the policies and procedures that the departments have to follow, then each department head then must adhere to those policies. But on the opposite side, when you start from the bottom going up, starting from the very front line, they should be able to identify the risks that are inherent in their business. They should be able to evaluate those risks and know how to manage those risks. They then in turn, once they are reviewed by the risk department and then by the audit department, they should know whether or not they are willing to accept the risk. And once you accept the risk, then you must know how to monitor it. And then a part of doing all of that is that you have to be able to report on your risk. And that reporting of the risk is a part of what we call good corporate governance. So when you talk about risk in an organization, there are many different types of risk. And it depends on the nature of your business. So you can have strategic risk. And that really refers to knowing how you want to drive your business. Where do you want it to go? How do you want to expand? Which jurisdiction do you want to go in? Whether or not you have the right CEO to lead your company where you want it to go. Where do you want to expand and go into different segments of your industry? Or where do you want to pursue it by staying in the same business, but going in different jurisdiction? Then you have operational risk. And that's being able to look at the organization and see how much, what's the ceiling on any potential loss that may occur due to error in operations. Then you have financial risk. And again, this is looking at the financial statements. Whether or not there is a risk that you're going to have less profitability this year based on certain assumptions. And that could be a difference in the valuation of your portfolio. It could be with a loan that you're expecting to roll over and the interest rate may have changed. You may also have financial risk when you look at the liquidity in your portfolio, the valuation of your portfolio, especially if you're dealing in equities and you're looking at shares are going up and down. And so you have a financial risk because you're going to have an exposure that you're going to have to deal with. Then you have compliance risk. And I know you all know all about compliance risk. And compliance risk really dealing with meeting all of your regulatory requirements, your statutory requirements and filings. And then you have reputational risk. And reputational risk comes from loss or the company itself experiencing some risk that affects the name of that company. Because once your reputation is tarnished, it's very hard to get your loyal customers to come back. So it depends on the nature of your business. You could categorize your risk as major risk, other significant risk, and unrelated risk. Major risk also carry the name of inherent risk, which means it's the risk that automatically arise based on the nature of your business. Other significant risks are risks that form a part of what we call the residual risk. And then unrelated risk could just be a risk that is just normal based on the nature of your business. So be mindful that every risk has its own definition. And if your company is a part of a group-wide company, all of the risks are consolidated in one report. And it's a consolidation of each jurisdiction prioritizing their risk and then grouping it all together. So as a part of risk management, if you're part of a group, they call it enterprise risk management because it's covering every aspect of your business in every jurisdiction, whether or not it is a branch or it is a subsidiary. Any questions before we move on?
No questions.
Okay. All right, no questions on risk. That is wonderful. So when you're talking about identifying risk, the next page gives you the process. So the first thing is you have to do a risk assessment, which means that the front line must be able to identify a risk. They must be able to analyze it, and they must be able to evaluate it, looking at whether it's just a one-time risk or continual risk. Now, once you've done a risk assessment, you do have to monitor it and you have to review it. But in addition to that, you also have to know how you're going to treat that risk. And treating that risk means how you're going to address it. And obviously, once you've done a risk assessment, you then have to turn around and communicate it. Sometimes it means that you have to have consultation with other departments, such as with risk or with audit, or sometimes maybe with finance, depends on what the risk is. And so all of that is an ongoing process in any organization, and the board must be aware of the risks that are inherent in your business, and the board must be aware of how you prioritize those risks and the impact on the organization. So I've given you a little wheel on enterprise risk management. And enterprise risk management, at the center of enterprise risk management is culture. The culture of an organization drives everything. And remember, culture starts from the top down. Any organization you walk into, always remember that. The way in which you are treated by the staff, the way in which the staff communicate with you, all comes from the top. And you could tell that when you visit different organizations. That's what drives a company from being a mediocre one to being one that is par excellence. is the culture of the organization. So what is enterprise risk management? It's the capability to effectively answer the following questions. Coverage. What are all of the risks to our business strategy and operations? And this is why you would see that board members, every 2 years or 3 years, they would have a strategic planning meeting outside of the organization, because they want to go and discuss their strategic goals and also look at any risks that are arising that would actually hinder them from achieving their goals. So they ask themselves, what are all the risks to our business strategy and operation? They know where they need to go. They know what they want to make in terms of profit. They know the size of their organization. They know who their competitors are. So now they have to make up their mind and come to a conclusion, what are the risks in our business strategy? What will hinder us from getting where we need to go in the next 3 to 5 years? Then it's risk appetite. How much risk are we willing to take? Now remember, the company already has a risk appetite. So if now they're looking at strategizing and going forward, they have to make a decision whether or not they're willing to stay at the risk level that they have already agreed to. Governance and policies. How good are we at overseeing risk taking? Which means they're going to look at their policies and see whether or not there have been any breaches to those policies and whether those policies need to be enhanced to achieve the goals that they're trying to project for the next 3 years. Risk data and infrastructure. How do we ensure we have the right information to manage risk? And that means looking at the components of your audit committee and your risk committee and your senior management team. Do we have the right people to carry out these functions? Are they risk-minded? Because it's not about profit-driven, because the profits will come, but you have to look at the risk, because a risk could come and wipe out all of your profit if you're not aware of what are the threats to your organization. Then measurement, evaluation, and communication. How do we determine the size and scope of the risk and report the results? So the board looks at the reports that are sent to them, and they need to see where the changes need to be made in the reporting. That could give them a better analysis of their exposure to risk and how they intend to address it. Then it's the control environment. And the control environment means that the managers have to be able to make a determination when they report to the board how well they are managing the risk. And how well they manage the risk, you will see that in the audit reports. Because the auditors will be able to tell you how many breaches that they have seen in policies and procedures and how they have been addressed, and whether they expose the institution to reputational risk or financial risk or legal risk or compliance risk. Then what are we doing about risk? So depends on what the risk is. Sometimes it involves dealing with marketing. Sometimes marketing has to be on the ball to have things drafted already in the event that a risk occurs that can affect either the brand of the organization or the reputation of the organization. And last but not least is stress testing. What else can go wrong and how are risks interconnected? So like just to say now, like how this hurricane is coming, companies that produce items will do stress testing. How long does our current inventory, how long will it last? If we have a rush of people that are coming to the water depot between now and Tuesday, do we have enough supply to produce more water for the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks? Do we have enough cash flow to meet our demands over this period? So it's not just Neiman right now making a decision and advising us that the storm is coming, but every business now has to sit down and strategically analyze what can go wrong and what are the risks to their organization. Any comments? No? So tied into risk management is corporate governance. And corporate governance is all about how the board of directors run a company. And in the last class, we spoke about directors and their fiduciary duties to the company. So from the very first unit when we began, we said that when a company is formed, it has two organs, the shareholders and the board. Corporate governance focuses on the shareholders and the board. It brings home that there is a division between those two organs. And it's talking about the separation of power. And you see more of that separation for companies that are publicly listed. Privately owned companies sometimes spill over. But for a publicly listed company, you see the separation of those powers. So in a small private company, the shareholders will act as the directors. But in a public company, the shareholders are the investors, and that's it. They're not involved in the day-to-day running of the company. But the board has the answer, because it's public, to the supervisory authorities based on the business that they are in.
Does sorry, I wanted to ask a question here. For a public company, do they have to like register under the security commissions because they allow shares to be purchased by the public?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There's a whole section in the Securities Act that speaks about the process when you're issuing shares. So you have to prepare a prospectus. The prospectus have to have certain things in it. Whenever you're going public, you have to go through the Securities Commission. So the shareholders, they focus on capital growth, which means they're looking at the monies that they invested and the potential return. And what they also look at is the composition of the board to make sure it is balanced. And that's a part of corporate governance. The members of the board have to be balanced if you want the company to be run properly. So corporate governance is about executing strategy and managing risk. It's also about ensuring compliance with corporate policies, standards, and procedures. And it's also about establishing strategic direction. That's what corporate governance is all about. So whenever you hear that word, it focuses on the board. And the board being able to follow its corporate governance policy to ensure that it's meeting all of its strategic goals and is managing risk. So the OECD defined corporate governance as a set of relationships between a company's management, its board, its shareholders, and other stakeholders. Corporate governance also provides the structure through which the objectives of the company are set and the means of attaining those objectives and monitoring performance are determined. So good corporate governance should provide proper incentives for the board and management to pursue objectives that are in the interests of the company and shareholders, and should facilitate effective monitoring, thereby encouraging firms to use resources more efficiently. So corporate governance provides a critical underpinning for the relationships, the responsibilities, and reporting lines for the board of directors, senior management, shareholders, employees, clients, and other stakeholders of an organization. So remember now, when the board sits down and they're making decisions, the decisions that they make are not just, say, for the interest of just the staff. They have to look at the interests of all of the stakeholders and decide who it impacts, so that decisions respond wholeheartedly to any potential threat that may arise. So the stakeholders for whom an effective corporate governance regime operates and benefits are, of course, the shareholders, the employees, investors, service providers or suppliers, and the community at large. And when we say the community at large, in terms of corporate governance, this is where that new terminology comes in about corporate social responsibility. Being able to give back to the community in which you operate. So at the heart of good corporate governance, at a proper understanding and appreciation and practice of the high standard of duty of skill and care that is expected of directors and senior management, making sure that they carry out their duties prudently with responsibility. And the board also have to make sure that they're always in compliance with the law. Board of directors should also know what their responsibilities are. And they should know what they are accountable for. Senior management should have clear reporting lines. And what makes good corporate governance is if they report certain matters to the board. So let's say we had a board meeting today and something happens tomorrow. You don't wait until the board meeting in 3 months to advise the board that we've had a breach. We may have a potential penalty, or we had a breach. It is foreseen that we'll have a loss of $60,000. And you know the risk appetite for losses per quarter is 10,000. So that means that you're gonna have to advise the board now. Because otherwise you'll be throwing a surprise on them at the end of the quarter, knowing that this took place from almost 3 months ago. So one of the integral mandates of the directors and senior management is to be able to identify, measure, monitor, control, and minimize the various risks that an organization faces. And remember, when it comes to identifying risk, everything is based upon the size of the business, the nature of the business, the clientele of the business, the vulnerabilities of the products and services, and the internal control system and processes, including threats of money laundering, fraud, collusion, and propriety. All of these things, the directors and senior management have to make sure that they minimize. Now, when you talk about, again, about good corporate governance, the board must ensure that the reports that they receive from senior management is accurate, it is reliable, it is timely, is relevant, and it must be thorough. And those are things that you're going to have to remember as a part of good corporate governance. So corporate governance doesn't mean that you sit on a board, you read the report, you put your hand up to vote. It involves much more. Because remember, being a board of director, just that word director, you have a fiduciary duty to the company. And then when the board meets to discuss matters, everything comes down to accuracy, reliability, timeliness, relevancy, and thoroughness. Now, when it comes to corporate governance, both the central bank and the Securities Commission have their guidelines or rules. And they stipulate how they expect their registrants to conduct corporate governance. And so at the end of every year, the central bank requires for the board to write an attestation whether or not they have identified any deficiencies in their business, whether they're being addressed. And if they are being addressed, how are they assessing and monitoring whatever discrepancy that they found? Because be mindful that the board is responsible for the effectiveness of corporate governance and the risk management process. So the board has to annually document their corporate governance process. Because based on that report, the regulator will be able to see whether or not they met their goals for the year. Now, it is also expected that the registrants would assess their overall control environment, their compliance culture, the policies and procedures and risk management system, that they are appropriate and effective in meeting and protecting the interests of the stakeholders, primarily the shareholders and the clients. So even when you, as a board member, it's normally done by the chairman and another director, even though you would prepare your director certification, stating that all these things are in place, it is always best to have an external auditor verify and confirm that the chairman has identified all of the deficiencies in the organization. Now, be mindful that under the Banks and Trust Companies Regulations Act, Section 77, it speaks to the preservation of confidentiality. And confidentiality and that duty that arises in that banker-customer relationship is one that was founded in common law. And based on that duty of confidentiality, it says that you have 4 exceptions to the duty of confidentiality. And those exceptions are the duty to disclose upon compulsion, the duty to public interest, the duty to disclose in the bank's interests, and the duty to disclose by express or implied consent of the customer. So those are the 3 exceptions when a client's information can be divulged. And Section 77 of the Banks and Trust Companies Regulation Act speaks to that. Any questions? Any questions so far?
No question.
Okay. So have you all read the Banks and Trust Companies Regulations Act 2020?
No, ma'am.
No?
Not, and is it in the email?
No.
Oh, I have to go. Like, okay.
Okay. Since you are not in banking, then you wouldn't know. But that duty of confidentiality that a banker owes to its client, you will see when you read the Banks and Trust Companies Regulations Act, Section 77. It speaks to that duty extending to the auditors, the accountants, to other supervisory bodies. That duty of confidentiality remains. So even when a subsidiary has to send information to its head office, that is still confidential. And of course, the governor has the right to provide beneficial ownership information to other supervisory authorities. And the regulators can share information between themselves. And the act gives them the authority to do so. Be mindful that a breach of that statutory duty of confidentiality is a fine of $25,000 or 2 years imprisonment or both. So directors themselves sitting on a board as a part of their fiduciary duty, they have to keep information confidential. And connected to that confidentiality, of course, is another piece of legislation that speaks about keeping confidential the information that you store on behalf of your clients. And that falls under the Data Protection Act. So under the Data Protection Act, a company has to keep the information that they have on clients current. They have to keep it for the purpose for which it was collected. And they have to make sure that other persons don't have access to that information. Always being mindful as a data controller that a data cannot be disclosed in any manner which is inconsistent for the purpose for which it is being kept. And when you read the legislation that governs different types of business, it has a retention period for records. And by law, it means that unless a particular matter is under investigation or has been sequestered by as a matter of national interest, or has been sequestered because of taxation, then that information needs to be destroyed based on the retention period that's required by law. Also, data has to be kept securely from unauthorized access. There shouldn't be any alteration made to data, no disclosure, no destruction, or accidental loss. Now, once you keep information on a person, the law says that they have a right of access, which means that they have a right to ask to see what is on their file. Except, of course, if the information that you have is under investigation or prosecution, or like I said, the tax, the VAT, the people at Department of Inland Revenue is investigating, then they cannot see the information that you have on file for them. Now, even though that duty of confidentiality and that right of access is there by law, when it comes to a matter that's under criminal proceedings, then the information that the data controller has is forwarded to the relevant authority. If the data itself is not under any question, it's just normal data, and there is an error in it, you can ask for rectification. An individual can also have the right to prohibit the processing of personal data for purposes of direct marketing. And we know that when you enter into a relationship with a bank, there is, as a part of the contract, direct telemarketing is included in that package. So even though you have a right by law to say whether or not you want it, when you open an account with a bank, it's already included that that is a part of the package that they will be doing that. And so you sign on to it automatically. So notwithstanding all of the protection that the Data Protection Act gives in terms of disclosing your information, or in terms of protecting you, or in terms of making sure that your information is kept accurate and it's secure, or in terms that once the purpose for which it was kept reaches its retention period, it can be destroyed or it should be destroyed. Your information can be released if it is in the interest of national security or part of a criminal investigation, or you're being prosecuted, or, like I say, you owe taxes. Your information can also be released if it's for the protection of international relations of the country, or if it is to prevent injury or damages or loss to a person or property, or enforcement of a court order, or required for the purpose of obtaining legal advice, or the disclosure may be made to a data subject concerned or to a person acting on his behalf, or disclosure made at the request or consent of the data subject. So be mindful that the Act itself provides for the appointment of a data commissioner. Right now, that is Mr. Michael Wright. The commissioner has the power to issue information, enforcement, and prohibition notices. The commissioner can appoint authorized officers for the purposes of inspection and examination. He can also restrict the transfer of personal data to jurisdictions that don't provide equivalent individual data protection. And he can also prosecute offenses under the Data Protection Act. So you can see that when you sit on a board and you are a part of the board of directors, or you are a part of senior management, the board directors themselves have a fiduciary duty. You as senior management have to ensure that you provide the board with timely and accurate information, because that's all a part of good corporate governance. The board has that responsibility to strategize for the business as to where it projects it's going to go, what it projects it's going to make. And that is based upon the reports that come from senior management. Now, everything that's being done within the organization and on behalf of all of its stakeholders, be mindful that that duty of confidentiality amongst the directors, along with that duty to protect information based on the Data Protection Act, means that the board of directors must, at the end of every year, be able to tell the regulator if it is a public entity or it is an entity that falls under one of the regulatory powers. It must be able to tell that regulator of any deficiencies that it has and how it is being addressed. So in this whole modern age of technology, to go hand in hand with that duty of confidentiality and that data protection in terms of maintaining a person's information, there is the Computer Misuse Act. And the Computer Misuse Act speaks about different offenses that can occur with some heavy penalties. So hand in hand with the Data Protection Act is the Computer Misuse Act. And it has 6 offenses. 1, unauthorized access to computer material. 2, access with the intent to commit or facilitate the commission of a crime. 3, unauthorized modification of computer material. 4, unauthorized use or interception of computer service. 5, unauthorized obstruction of use of computer. And 6, unauthorized disclosure of access code. So that means that if a person is not authorized and they deliberately intend to have access to information or any program, and they are not authorized to do so, they are guilty of an offense and a fine of $5,000 or 6 months in prison. And how this act operates is it has penalties or imprisonment for your first time as an offense. And then it has it if it is your second offense. And on the second offense, the fine or the term in prison is doubled. So the first one, unauthorized access to computer material, has to do with hackers who try to get into the system and don't have and are not authorized to access the information. The second offense, which is access with the intent to commit or facilitate the commission of an offense. And this is where a person uses a computer to gain access to any program or the data held in another computer with the intent to commit an offense. An offense could be fraud, it could be dishonesty, or it could be causing bodily harm. And here you have a term of 2 or more years imprisonment. And it says any person found guilty of this offense will be liable on a summary conviction to a maximum fine of $10,000 or 3 years imprisonment or both. The third one is unauthorized modification of computer material. Any person who is found deliberately or knowingly causes the unauthorized modification of the contents of any computer is guilty of an offense. Notwithstanding the fact that the data or program held in the computer that may have been affected by the unauthorized modification was not the data or program of the computer. And again, the fine is $10,000 or 1 year imprisonment or both. And on subsequent conviction, the fine and the prison term are doubled. And of course, if there's any damage to the computer, there's another fine for that. Unauthorized use or interception of computer service Any person who knowingly secures unauthorized access to a computer for the purpose of obtaining directly or indirectly any computer service or intercepts or causes to be intercepted without authority, directly or indirectly, any function of a computer, that carries a penalty of $10,000 or 3 years imprisonment or both. If they're convicted of it a second time, the maximum fine again is doubled to $20,000 or a maximum term of 3 years or both. If there is damage, a maximum fine of $50,000 is required to be paid or imprisonment up to 5 years. Unauthorized obstruction of the use of a computer. So any person who knowingly and without authority or lawful excuse interferes with, interrupts or obstructs the lawful use or functioning of a computer, or impedes or prevents access to any computer or data stored in a computer, the penalty is $10,000 or a maximum term of 3 years or both. Any subsequent offense is $20,000 or a maximum term of 5 years. Unauthorized disclosure of access codes. Any person who knowingly and without authority discloses any password, access code, or any other means of gaining access to any program or data held in a computer for wrongful gain or any unlawful purpose, or disclosing such information, knowing that is likely to cause wrongful loss to any person, is guilty of an offense. And the penalty there is $10,000, maximum of 3 years imprisonment. And a subsequent offense is a fine of $20,000 or maximum term of 5 years imprisonment or both. The act also makes provision for more severe penalties in instances where an offense underlying the act involves a protected computer. That is a computer used for security, defense, international relations, law enforcement, communication infrastructure, public utilities, medical or essential services. And the penalty for that is a maximum fine of $100,000 or 20 years imprisonment or both. The act also gives the police wide powers of search and seizure under certain specified conditions, and the court has the power to order forfeiture of any property which was in possession or under the control of a person convicted of an offense under the Computer Misuse Act, particularly where such property was used or intended to be used for the purpose of committing or facilitating the commission of the offense. Any questions or comments? No? No questions on risk? No questions on corporate governance? No questions on confidentiality?
No question.
Okay. Well, the chapter was not very long today. How's my midterm going?
Getting there.
Oh my God. Well, you have time today. After when we wrap up now, you have time today to finish it at least. Because we have how many more classes? 2? We have 2 more classes, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So that's coming soon. You'll have 2 more weeks together and send it to me.
That's the midterm, right? That you want us to send?
Yes, I want midterm final.
Okay.
So in the event that you need a makeup question, you'll have time to do it. You don't want to give me the two on the same day because once I get the final, you know that's it. So I just want to make sure that you have sufficient time in the event there's something on your midterm that you need to work on. You have sufficient time. Okay?
That's one.
All right. So get ready for the hurricane. Get ready for the funeral. You want some homework? I could send you all a question.
No, ma'am, that's fine. Oof. I feel this front will make me cry.
Y'all like to run from my questions now. All right. Okay. So have a good weekend and I'll hear from you all next week.
Yes, ma'am. Same. Have a good weekend as well.
Yes, and be safe.
You too.
All right. Bye.
Bye.